CME Group Chief Economist Blue Putnam presented recently a research called Opportunities and Challenges in Latin America Economies. Now you will know some details about his study. I'm Luciane Miranda and this is São Paulo Direct by Dukascopy TV. And I'll talk now to Blue Putnam. I'd like you to talk about our GDP. This is slowdown.
Yes, Brazil's had a slowdown, and it's been a tough period for the last couple of years. My analysis says that it's only about half your fault. China has decelerated, Europe is not growing, the U.S. is only growing at 2.5% GDP. Commodity prices have been falling around the world, so there's a lot of headwinds from the international sector that kind of set the stage for slower growth in Brazil. And that's really, those things aren't going away so easily. So it's going to be hard for Brazil to grow as fast as it once did. But it can do a little better next year.
But is it a consequence of a crisis abroad, or we have domestic reasons for this GDP slowdown?
Well, it's partly a consequence, not of a crisis abroad, but China is decelerating and Europe is stagnant. So these kind of things are just an overhang. And then on the domestic side, obviously when a country grows as fast as Brazil did in the first part of the century, it actually creates some dislocations, it creates some demands for more services, and perhaps the World Cup got a little bit in the way of these things. So there's plenty of domestic reasons too why things slowed down a little bit. And then we had an issue, the currency's been a little weak, and so interest rates are 10, 11%, and that's not been a great thing either. So there's some domestic reasons as well, but it's kind of 50-50.
What about the elections here in Brazil? What can you see?
Well, the foreigners have an interesting view of elections. We don't know very much about all the domestic politics, so when we look at them, we see a resolution of uncertainty. That is, once the election is over, then you have a new president, no matter who it is, and that person will take over and guide the country, and foreigners will become less risk averse just because the election is over and it went smoothly. Now, of course, you have to figure out whether you like the new president or you don't and how it worked out and so forth, things like that. But we're looking more from the financial markets at a risk reduction, less uncertainty, and that'll be very good for Brazil. My real concern about the election, though, is what they're not talking about. They're not talking about water. And when I look at Brazil for 2015, I'm way less worried about the election outcome than I am about the drought. So that's my issue is what are they going to do about the drought in Brazil as opposed to how the election turns out.
Besides the lack of water here in Brazil, especially in São Paulo, can you see other internal risks for our economy?
Yes, there are a few risks. The commodity prices around the world are quite low and falling. So lower agricultural prices is not that good for Brazil as an exporting nation. Lower oil prices will actually help some countries. It's going to help the U.S. because when we have lower oil prices, our refineries buy the oil cheaper and they give us the petrol at the pump cheaper. So I will be able to drive more for less money. But in Brazil, it doesn't work that way. Petrobras will import some oil. They will pay less for it, but your cost at the petrol pump is subsidized. So you will pay the same, and Petrobras will get a little benefit. So the world commodity situation is a little bit of a negative factor right now for Brazil, and there's nothing the government can do to change that. That's a global situation.
Okay. We have a lot of government intervention in companies, states, and strategic companies like Petrobras. I'd like your opinion about that.
Generally, as countries develop, there's the early stages of development. It's quite common to want to protect companies and intervene in companies to make sure that they're aligned with national goals and that you grow them domestically appropriately. As countries get more dynamic and move up the scale, which is what Brazil has done, then the pendulum swings to a need to deregulate to some extent. And the pendulum had really started to swing 5 or 6 years ago in Brazil, where the level of regulation probably now holds back the economy a little bit. It's not terrible, but it's definitely a drag. And I think over the next 4 or 5 years, again, regardless of who wins the election, there's going to be a little bit of progress in that direction.
Okay, I'd like you to talk about tapering of QE3, the Fed funds rise, and consequences for our currency, Brazilian real.
Yes, the U.S. Federal Reserve will probably end its quantitative easing program literally this month. They meet on October 30th, and they will decide, we think, to end their asset buying program completely, be all gone. Last year, when they started the tapering process, it was associated about the time of a sell-off in currencies, including the Brazilian real. I don't actually think the QE caused the problems with the currency. Many people do, but I don't. I think it was also the time of the demonstrations around the World Cup, and there were many other issues going on. But I don't think the QE is the issue. In fact, I think it's a positive thing for Brazil. If the Federal Reserve ends QE and eventually raises rates somewhere in 2015, the signal that the Fed is sending is that the Federal Reserve is now confident that the U.S. economy no longer needs emergency assistance. And that's actually a positive signal for every country in the world that the U.S. is going to keep growing. So I think you have to weigh the end of QE, a little higher interest rates against this positive confidence builder that the Federal Reserve is now saying it's okay, we don't need to give you emergencies, you're out of the hospital, you know. So that's a good thing, and I think that will actually help growth in Brazil.
Can you see opportunities in carry trade transactions involving exits here in Brazil?
I see opportunities, but I wouldn't rush to take them. Here's the issue. The stock markets have had a very tough last 3 or 4 weeks around the world. When stock markets go down, global investors take less risk all over the world, Brazil included. And that's generally not good for a currency like the Brazilian real or the Mexican peso, things like that. So you don't want to be buying or doing the carry trade when stock markets are going down. You need to wait till they stabilize. And by the way, I think by November in December they'll be stabilized and start to grow again in January. So I think that problem will go away, but it's too early to do the carry trade. The second thing that has to happen is we do need the Fed to end QE and to give this more positive view of the U.S. economy that I think they will do. And that will help calm, again, global nerves a little bit. The third thing that has to happen is you need to get the election over. The next president takes over, things are calm, and then you have to figure out this drought situation. And when those 4 things are when everything like that has happened, then the 10-11% interest rates here will look very exciting. And you may want to buy the real and sell the peso. You may want to buy the real and Mexican peso. You may want to buy the real and sell the Japanese yen or the euro, but not yet.
Blue Putnam, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Luciene Miranda to São Paulo Direct by Dukascopy TV.